It's late. Obviously, my hair is in I don't give a fuck mode. Because I'm gonna go to bed soon. I have to get up early. But I had so much to digest from the last few days. I thought I'd do 2 separate videos, and then tonight I woke up and I said, you know what? No, we'll just do it all in one because I'm not going to focus on this stuff for too long. I think the first thing I want to talk about, we have the big kerfluffle, I guess would be a fun word to use to describe Louisiana's RFRA executive endorsement, I guess would be the appropriate word, that Bobby Jindal signed a couple days ago. I'm pretty hot about that. That hit a lot of buttons for me. I love Louisiana. I lived down in Biloxi for a while. Got to travel there all the time on the weekends. Airmen would go drink, and I was a minor, so I'd just have to walk around and entertain myself. And New Orleans especially has plenty of things to do to entertain yourself. With the whole thing with the RFRA, the fact that his congressional peers were not willing to pull the trigger and say, let's do this completely, as far as further clarifying and supporting an RFRA act. I mean, technically they already have one. It's been in effect since 2010. This just kind of reaffirmed and further protected Louisiana state constitution, where they ban same-sex marriage and protect religious liberty. And mind you, Jindal's idea of religious liberty is being able to tell you to go fuck off, go away, I don't like you because of whatever such and such reason, because they're my religiously protected beliefs. Of course, that's only religiously protected beliefs that don't fall under the federal protection clauses, I would think, but it sounds like they're trying to get around all of this, which is really weird because it kills me. Louisiana has a lot going for it, but it's been suffering for a while because of politicians, especially ones like Jindal, that are just out there greedily eyeing a better position in government. I mean, I really think Jindal thinks he's the next messiah for the 2016 presidential campaigns. If you can't get the state of Louisiana under control, how in the fuck are you going to handle 49 more states? Seriously, he doesn't have a record to show he can handle it, so I personally wouldn't even consider him a legitimate candidate for president, but obviously he sees it that way because he's making a lot of political overtures and statements and legislation attempts to further, I guess, promote himself to the conservative right. I'm not sure where he's going with this, but I don't think it's going to be to his benefit in the long run. But like I said, we've already had these types of cases handled. One of the best ones that comes to mind would be with Governor Bilbo, of all people, from over there in Mississippi. He really believed in segregation, and he used the Bible to justify that all the way to court. He eventually, he didn't lose because this was the 30s, but later governors, they lost. They just couldn't get away with using the Bible to justify their discrimination and hate. Even the Supreme Court was like, no, this is a government matter. We definitely have to step in. I think the most famous one for me was Bob Jones University. In case you don't know, Bob Jones University, infamous, I would say, because for probably, I think it was until like the mid-70s, if you were black, you weren't going to attend that college. And when the IRS essentially threatened to jerk their tax exempt status, Bob Jones tried to modify a little bit. They tried to compromise, said, okay, well, yeah, African Americans can attend, but can't be married, and we're still not going to allow interracial dating or interracial marriage. And if we find out you're supporting those types of movements, you're out. We're not going to let you learn or get an education here. Well, IRS said that's not going to fly. Took away their exempt status. And in 1983, this was going on up until 1983, when we had big hair, we had Twisted Sister, cocaine, rap, DMC, all this stuff going on. You wouldn't think we had these problems in 1983, but we did. 1983, it went to Supreme Court, and of course the Supreme Court was like, yeah, you can't do this. We're not doing this anymore. You're getting all of these benefits, but you can't apply your religion in order to help, I guess, focus on a better demographic. Between the abuse of the exemption status and the obvious discrimination that was going on against race, the Supreme Court said no, and Bob Jones lost. There was also an Amish employer who didn't want to pay into the Social Security system based on his preciously held religious beliefs. Same story. It's not fair. It's completely upending the playing field for other businesses who have to pay in, because you're getting an advantage by not having to pay. This isn't going to work because everybody will claim this and defunct the system. And that's essentially, basis for why, I don't know why we're even discussing this stuff anymore. This has already been discussed. It's been tried. It's done. It's decided. But Jindal's executive order, I just want to say, it's not really anything new, but it's more of a loud and proud kind of statement of, we're protecting our Constitution, which just so happens to ban same-sex marriage and enjoys pumping up freedom of liberty for your religion, and you're protected from being discriminated against if you're religious, which is interesting. I hope the Satanists have a field day in Jindal's town. I really do. But ultimately, Jindal, of course, like all the others have said, including Governor Pence, Asa Hutchins, yeah, all these guys, right? Oh, we're not encouraging discrimination. You are. In fact, I would go further and say you're encouraging segregation. You're completely supporting segregation. In the South, back in the 60s, during the Civil Rights era, before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VII was put into place. Towns, like small businesses in towns, like the cake shops, the coffee shops, the restaurants, doctors' offices, schools at some point, they started refusing services to African Americans. So what would happen if you lived in that town as an African American? You had to go outside of that town to find somebody that could take care of yourself. Or your community of fellow African Americans would start their own restaurants, coffee shops, medical buildings, schools. Okay? That's how segregation started. You are encouraging discrimination. In fact, you're trying to resegregate the South. I mean, technically, it's still kind of segregated, I would say. That was my experience when I lived in Biloxi. But, I mean, this is blatantly endorsing resegregating the South. Only this time we're going to do it with the LGBTQ community, which is just not acceptable. If you pay tax dollars in America, you get the same rights as everybody. It's not a hard concept here. You can't be in the same sandbox but say, well, this corner is only ours, even though you're helping to help pay for the sand that we are all playing in. And it doesn't work that way. No. So yeah, I was really upset about everything going on down in Louisiana. I know yesterday I had a pretty much knee-jerk reaction. I went into caps lock, fuck yeah mode on Facebook. I was really upset. I'm kind of calmed down a little bit. Just a little bit. I'll wait and see what happens. I don't know if there's going to be as much of a backlash as Indiana. But we'll see. I think they brought to highlight the fact that, again, we need to make sexual identity, not just what you identify as, but your preferencing and all of it. All of that just needs to fall under your sexual identity. That way you cannot be discriminated against. It needs to all be under that federal class of protection. Then there won't be any of this arguing about it, And then we get more headlines today. I'm going to switch topics now. About the Diggers. Digger. I I don't know how you say their name. I don't care. Everybody can't figure it out. It's the family with way too many kids. That family, the Quiverful people. And their son, who apparently has admitted he molested a bunch of his family members in his youth. I love how they keep focusing on how young he was. Like, that makes it better. Like, oh, those kids, he's just exploring his sexuality, he was wrong. All these excuses. I mean, what was it? I read this article. I think it was the New York Daily Times version of what was going on. Sorry. Yeah, they mentioned how young he was no less than 7 times in the article. He was 15, 14, 13. I don't care how young he was. This wasn't 2 kids 5 years old playing doctor. This was predatory behavior where people were either younger than him and helpless, could not give consent, and he took advantage of them when they were sleeping. That shows clear sign he knew what he was doing was wrong, and I don't care how young he was. What was even more irritating was that they keep focusing on what he did to fix things. What are they doing to fix the people that he molested? What about their healing? What is he doing for them? Do they want anything from him at this point? I mean, obviously he gave them more than they even asked for. I just don't understand why they're focusing on what he's done. It's obviously they're trying to do damage control, and they're talking to all the outlets. And they talk about, oh, well, he went to this hard labor-intensive summer camp where he also was taught more on, I guess, spirit versus the flesh desire, that kind of thing. I grew up in that kind of a household myself. It doesn't help. Forget the fact that it took at least 4 or 5 different occasions of this kid doing this stuff before they actually went to the authorities. And then on top of that, it turns out later, and they keep mentioning this, the law enforcement officer they spoke with apparently later was busted on child pornography charges, like 54 of them, or no, he's serving 54 years in prison. So this guy had a lot of stuff. I can't fault the Duggars for this particular law enforcement gentleman's own failings, because obviously they didn't know, or I doubt Jim Bob would have gone to this particular cop, because it wouldn't have worked out well. Of course, it's still, as a parent, if I had a child who did what this man did to my own children, cousins, other members of the church's children, okay, I think it'd be a huge red flag if the policeman decided he didn't want to pursue any further investigation or charges and just gave his son a, quote, stern talking to. That's not rational. That's not even logical in 2005 when all of this went down. No, this kid should have been booked. Should have been in juvenile, having some serious discussions with whoever. Because obviously he had predator behavior, and he kept doing it even after his community had tried to correct him. How many times? At least 4, maybe 5. We don't know all the truth here. But I know a lot of people have been discussing, the protocol, how they justify this stuff, how they're focusing on what they did to fix him so he won't do this anymore. And there was a quote in particular that really just, it irked the ever-loving crap out of me here. I've got to pull this up because I couldn't believe it when I read it. Quote, let me get my glasses on here, sorry again. He said, what did he say? It was kind of crazy. It was basically something along the lines of, they tried to teach him right from wrong, and then he realized himself that he had to get his life under control because he was going down the wrong path. I wish I could find the quote. It's it really shows you the mindset of what they try to program into these kids instead of looking at how bad it is. They focus on instead, well, this is going to ruin your life if you keep doing it. They don't point out to this kid, you've already ruined lives. Because I'm sorry, he did. He's permanently affected these young women's lives. Well, at the time, girls. They don't even talk about that to him. They talk about how he's screwing up his life, his future, his oneness with God. His eternal soul is at stake. They don't focus on the consequences of what he's done to the lives of these women and their future relationships. I can tell you firsthand. I mean, I was molested by my father. God-fearing, loving man. It took him only 10 minutes to get me into the bed once my mom was in the hospital. Okay? There's a point where it's not about fighting fleshly desires at all. It's finding a way to justify it, do the I'm a fuck up for Christ routine, and move forward. Okay? And obviously, when he was 14 and 15, he was still learning the routine. But he got it down. And if this hadn't come to light, I mean, we probably never would have known about it. And I'm sorry, that temptation's always there. If you have a deviancy for that type of behavior, it doesn't just go away with 3 months in a work camp. It's always there. And he has children, or at least one on the way anyway. And of course, his wife is going to justify his behavior because he was young and he learned his lesson and he's a fuck up for Christ. It always comes back to being a fuck up for Christ, doesn't it? The sins of the flesh is what my parents' therapist had said. In fact, my parents went to therapy because I left home when I was 15, 16, and they went to therapy because I managed to finally get out of that house by revealing what my dad had done to me, to my mother. And she chose my father over me. She was more worried about him going to jail than fixing her daughter and the damage that was done, which is not unusual, as we see here with the Duggar situation. They're more focused on fixing the son than actually healing everybody. No, they'll just pray for everybody else and let their families deal with the aftermath. Let the women deal with their mixed emotions and feelings. Let them sometimes be creeped out a certain way their future husband or boyfriend might touch them, or a certain way they hear a laugh will just kind of go down their spine the wrong way. I know this firsthand. I deal with this all the time. And I'm 38 on Tuesday. So we're talking 30 years later. And I still have these things going on. I'll still wake up sometimes and think I hear footsteps on the stairs coming to my bed. You just don't make that go away. But at least the offender is entitled to his happiness, right? We got him on the right path, so his life is going to be okay. That's all I'm hearing here. And that is the problem with Christian treatment. Not Christian treatments. They're not all that way. I can't really paint that with such a broad brush. But within the evangelical churches, especially the quiverful movements, the Mormonism especially too, you can't deny that. They have a major problem with sex abuse and encouraging the healing of the offender and not the offended. Because the offended, you have to remember, their body belongs to Christ anyway. So really, the Duggar boy didn't molest the girls. He molested Christ. Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Sometimes I just want to lose faith in all humanity. Because you would think a little bit of a thought process and they can understand the bigger picture. But they don't see it. And there's nothing we can do about that until we get better laws in place. And because the statute of limitations have run out, not just the son that was molesting the girls, but Jim Bob himself should count himself lucky, even Michelle. Because frankly, if the statute of limitations were still in place, they would be going to jail. Because they're responsible. They were irresponsible, negligent even, in the way they handled the situation with their son molesting family members. And from what I understand, it was possibly their own daughters too. And he's standing there in all the pictures right next to them all these years later. They're going to act like he was young, he fucked up, Christ set him right. His life is going to be great. Because it's all about this kid's life being on track. Obviously, they are not thinking on the right track.